In a world already reshaped by war, trade shocks, and shifting alliances, two leaders meet face to face, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. What they agree on and what they don't could reshape global economics, the future of Taiwan, and the balance of power for decades. Stay with us. We'll unpack every high-stakes item on the table, what each side really wants, and what the rest of the world should fear or hope for. This isn't a routine state visit. The US and China are the world's largest economy and the single biggest strategic competitor to America's global role. When they talk, markets move, allies take notes, and military planners update contingency plans. Two priorities dominate the agenda: economics and security. Beijing wants stable trade and a softer US posture on Taiwan. Washington wants to protect technology, press back on economic coercion, and limit Chinese influence where it sees strategic risk.
Trade and tariffs are front and center. After years of tit-for-tat duties, both sides face a choice: escalate and fracture global supply chains, or negotiate targeted measures to protect strategic industries. Energy and commodities are also in play. Global markets remain jittery after regional conflicts and sanctions. Beijing seeks predictable energy flows and trade stability, while the US wants to ensure sanctions and strategic restrictions remain effective. From Washington's side, the calculus is political and practical. The US still follows the One China policy, but maintains robust defense ties with Taiwan and sells defensive arms. Any perceived concession risks severe political backlash at home and could upset allies in the Indo-Pacific.
Another shadow over the talks is the Middle East. Ongoing conflict has global supply chain consequences and has forced both Washington and Beijing to consider regional stability as part of any global deal. China emphasizes de-escalation and stable trade routes, while the US is focused on sanctions enforcement and containing proliferation risks. Both sides have incentives to cooperate, but mistrust runs deep. Donald Trump is not only negotiating with Xi, he's negotiating with his own political base. Any perceived softness on China or Taiwan could be framed as weakness by opponents. Yet Trump also sees a summit as a chance to claim a foreign policy success. Expect a mix of transactional proposals, trade deals, enforcement agreements that can be sold as wins to US voters, while trying to avoid major structural commitments that would anger the political right. Xi Jinping's goals are broader. He's looking for long-term strategic stability that allows China to keep advancing economically and internationally, while avoiding secondary conflicts that could derail domestic priorities.
Other countries are watching closely. US allies in Asia, Japan, South Korea, Australia want clarity and reassurance. Taiwan itself watches for both deterrence and diplomatic isolation. A softer US stance could embolden Beijing regionally. A hardline approach could push others to hedge or accelerate their own defense planning. We run through 3 economic scenarios and what they mean for global markets.
Beyond formal diplomacy, expect an increase in gray zone activities: cyber intrusions, maritime freedom operations, proxy competition, and economic coercion. Europe, India, ASEAN nations, and African partners will read the summit through the lens of their own strategic and economic interests.
History shows that agreements without verification often unravel. Both sides know that commitments must be enforceable if they're to stabilize relations. Watch for new bilateral mechanisms, joint working groups, trade dispute resolution pathways, and tech export licensing frameworks. Spin matters. Both Xi and Trump will curate outcomes for domestic audiences: victory claims, nationalist frames, and selective transparency. AI chips and advanced semiconductors are now strategic commodities. Washington wants to limit Beijing's access to the most advanced nodes. Beijing wants to keep momentum on domestic tech.
Given political risk on both sides, expect incremental and reversible compromises rather than sweeping treaties. If talks fail badly, we could see renewed tariffs, targeted sanctions, a spike in military incidents, and a faster bifurcation of supply chains, all of which would drag the global economy into deeper uncertainty. Firms should accelerate contingency planning, diversify suppliers, secure alternative markets, and stress test operations against sanctions and export controls.
Leaders across Asia and Europe have already offered cautious statements about the summit. Their reactions will shape the second-order effects. Handshake photos, state dinners, and joint press conferences aren't just ceremonial. They're messaging tools used to craft a narrative of stability or rivalry. If you're watching live, look for 3 things: joint statements on Taiwan language, concrete tariff or trade measures, and any sign of side agreements on tech or sanctions. Whether the summit yields détente, stalemate, or confrontation, its legacy will be measured in how it reshapes alliances, supply chains, and the rules of global order for the next decade. Quick corrections. 1. A single summit rarely fixes structural rivalry. 2. Rhetorical wins don't guarantee policy shifts. 3. The rest of the world will keep maneuvering, regardless of a handshake. If you found this useful, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which summit outcome worries you most: tariffs, Taiwan, or tech controls. Imagine a week after the summit, tariffs eased slightly, a joint framework announced, markets rally briefly, but Taiwanese military purchases are paused pending review. Domestic critics in the US call it a sellout. Beijing calls it progress toward reunification. The next year sees increased gray zone activity in the South China Sea and a new round of tech self-reliance policies. For most people, the summit's consequences show up in prices, job prospects, and national security perceptions. Higher prices for electronics, changing job patterns in manufacturing, and the news cycle's dominated by geopolitical tension.
Expect compromise on process, not principle. Technology and Taiwan are the true linchpins. Allies and markets will adapt quickly. The summit's optics matter as much as its text. This summit matters because it's about more than 2 leaders. It's about the rules that will govern the global economy and security for years to come. Subscribe for ongoing coverage and analysis as this story unfolds.